What's up, guys? How's it going? Mr. Aaron coming back with another ODFP showcase. And in today's showcase, we're going to be talking about Nikita Khrushchev, an individual who lived between the years of 1894 to 1971. He was known for leading the Soviet Union as its premier during the height of the Cold War from 1958 to 1964, and he replaced Joseph Stalin and brought about many reforms that ended the totalitarian regime that was previously seen here in the Soviet Union. Now, we begin with Khrushchev's story by first focusing on what the Cold War was and the role Khrushchev played in heating it up. Now, the Cold War began in Europe, where the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, confronted each other after World War II. Each superpower created alliances made up of nations that it either occupied or protected. The United States led what became known as NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the Soviet Union led the Warsaw Pact in Eastern Europe. Now, these two alliances faced off against each other along what became known as the Iron Curtain, the tense line between the democratic West and the communist East. Now, we are going to see the Cold War being referred to as cold because there was no large-scale fighting directly between the two sides here, although there are major regional wars known as proxy wars that were supported by the two sides. Now, the Cold War split the two superpowers of the world, the United States of America versus the Soviet Union, because of the dueling ideologies and the differences that were created from the economic and political standpoint. Now, the Soviet Union operated around a planned command economy where the government takes a major role in all of it. And it controlled the press and owned exclusively the rights to establish and govern communities. And the United States went in a complete opposite direction. They operated in an opposite direction where they were capitalist with general free elections and press, and also granted freedom of expression and freedom of association to its citizens. In addition to the division established between the United States and the Soviet Union, the Cold War was marked by an arms race, baby. An arms race where a competition was created where each side tried to outnumber the other in not only weapons and resources, but most notably that of weapons of mass destruction. Now, going back to Khrushchev, you have to understand his background to better comprehend the man that he became. As premier of the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War, Nikita Khrushchev was born on April 15, 1894, in a small Russian village near the Ukrainian border. Khrushchev later would join the Communist Bolsheviks in 1918, more than a year after they had seized power during the Russian Revolution. In 1929, Khrushchev moved to Moscow, where he steadily rose through the Communist Party ranks, eventually entering the inner circle of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who by that time had consolidated control over the country and instituted a bloody purge of perceived enemies. Millions of people died during this purge, or killed or imprisoned during this purge in Russian gulag labor camps, and millions also died in famines brought on by the forced collectivization of agriculture. We're going to fast forward to the years of World War II, where Khrushchev would also take a command position, where he mobilized troops to fight Nazi soldiers, not only in the Ukraine, but also in Stalingrad. Now, after the war, Khrushchev helped to rebuild the devastated countryside while simultaneously stifling Ukrainian national dissent. And by the time Stalin died in March of 1953, Khrushchev had positioned himself as a possible successor. 6 months after Stalin's death, he would later become the head of the Communist Party and one of the most powerful people in the USSR. Now, once in power, Khrushchev shocked Soviets when he gave a long speech in February of 1956 that criticized Stalin for arresting and deporting opponents, for elevating himself above the party, and for the incompetent wartime leadership. Khrushchev even went as far as renaming the city of Stalingrad and removed Stalin's remains from Lenin's mausoleum in Moscow's Red Square. Now, as a result of this quote-unquote de-Stalinization, protesters in Soviet satellite states of Poland and Hungary, well, they demanded reform and change. Khrushchev would later respond by resolving the Polish revolt in a peaceful manner. However, the Hungarian revolt wasn't so peaceful. It was violently suppressed with troops and tanks, and at least we're going to see 2,500 Hungarians killed and another 13,000 that were wounded. As a result, more and more people from the USSR continued to flee westward into the capitalist and democratic states of Europe, while others were also being arrested and or deported. Now, under Khrushchev's premiership, he worked to increase agricultural production and raise living standards. Even though he was not always successful, he also reduced the power of the Soviet Union's feared secret police and released many political prisoners and relaxed artistic censorship, opened up more of the country to foreign visitors, and inaugurated the space age in 1957 with the launch of the Soviet Sputnik. 2 years later, we're going to see a Soviet rocket hit the moon. In 1961, a Soviet astronaut, Yuri A. Gagarin, became the first man in space. Now, in terms of Khrushchev's foreign policy, however, he had a complicated relationship with the West. A fervent believer in communism, he nonetheless preferred peaceful coexistence with capitalist countries, and unlike Stalin, he even visited the United States. Relations between the two superpowers deteriorated somewhat in 1960 when the Soviets shot down an American U-2 spy plane deep inside their territory. The following year, Khrushchev approved the construction of the Berlin Wall in order to stop East Germans from fleeing to capitalist West Germany. And in 1962, we're going to see the Cold War really heat up. It reached a high boiling point when the United States discovered Soviet nuclear missiles stationed right here in Cuba. Now, the world appeared to be on the brink of nuclear conflict, but after a 13-day standoff, Khrushchev agreed to remove the weapons. In return, US President John F. Kennedy, who 1 year earlier had authorized the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, publicly consented not to attack Cuba. Kennedy also privately agreed to take American nuclear weapons out of Turkey. And in July of 1963, guys, we're going to see the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union negotiate a partial nuclear test ban. Now, one of the sharpest thorns in Khrushchev's side was his relationship with fellow communist Mao Zedong, the leader of China. Starting around 1960, we're going to say, the two sides engaged in an increasingly vindictive war of words, with Khrushchev calling Mao a left revisionist who failed to comprehend modern warfare. Now, the Chinese, meanwhile, would criticize Khrushchev as a song-singing buffoon who underestimated the nature of Western imperialism. And as a result of the break with China and food shortages in the USSR, guys, we're going to see Khrushchev's legitimacy end in many of the eyes of other high-ranking Soviet officials who are already bothered by what they saw as his erratic tendency to undercut their authority. Now, in October of 1964, we're going to see Khrushchev being called back from a vacation in Georgia and being forced to resign as both premier and head of the Communist Party. Khrushchev would later end his life by writing memoirs and quietly living out the remainder of his life by dying of a heart attack in September of 1971. But nonetheless, his spirit of reform live on during the days of the perestroika era of the 1980s. All right, that's all I have for this ODFP showcase deal with this guy, Nikita Khrushchev. I hope you guys enjoyed. Mr. Arnold, signing off. I'll see you guys later. Take care.